We know that the digital space is filled with dangers, both physical and spiritual. But do we understand to what degree? Today's guest is a cybersecurity veteran and devout Catholic that is going to help us men understand how to protect ourselves from both physical and spiritual downfall in this age of information. Stay with us.
Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Gentleman Podcast. I'm Sam Guzman, your host, along with my co-host, John Heinen. And today we are joined by Jeff Jimenez, a cybersecurity expert. But before we get to know Jeff, I just want to encourage you to hit the subscribe button on YouTube and click the bell to get notifications when we release new content. And if you love the Catholic Gentleman Podcast and want to support us in some way, please consider donating on Patreon. We've got a lot of great tiers set up for you with some really cool rewards. So check us out at patreon.com/Catholic Gentleman and see what we have to offer and see if there's any tiers that would work for you. We really appreciate your support. Now we want to turn to our guest, Jeff Jimenez. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Sam and John. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Glad to have you.
I'm excited to talk about this topic of cybersecurity and data privacy. But before we get to that, let's talk about why you're qualified to talk about this. Mm-hmm. You've been working in cyber defense in the private sector for 15 years. So you've kind of seen the internet grow up and the cyber world grow up. You've received your undergraduate degree in theology from the University of St. Thomas in Houston, and you've got a lot of diverse interests. So it's not just cyber tech stuff, but you also have an interest in Catholics in the postmodern workplace, personal safety and defense, neuro-hacking, and building resiliency, and you're also a husband and father to 5. So that's a lot of cool stuff. I'm impressed.
Well, it's your fault for creating the Catholic Gentleman. So I've been following you guys for many years, and so I've applied a lot of the things I've learned in my life from all the things that you shared. So yeah, I credit you guys.
Wonderful, thank you. And so just to kind of start us off, we've all seen the movies and shows on TV where there's this hacker and he can, hack into the traffic lights and make him do what he wants and like hack into any webcam on earth within 30 seconds or less. He can override just about anything. You can make your car brakes turn on, all these things. So is this the realm of cybersecurity? I mean, how real is this stuff? And what's your role in all of this?
Yeah, no, thank you. Great question. I mean, that's the question I actually get probably once a month from different family members or, new friends I meet. And then they're like, hey, can someone actually hack my Tesla? They'll ask me these types of questions. And the reality is that these things can be possible, but is it worth it for the threat? So yes, like these things happen. You've seen the Colonial Pipeline hack that shut down energy to the East Coast, very serious type of supply chain attack, right? But it has to be worth it. And typically the movies, some movies are accurate, but I'd say like 5% have some accuracy. But because it's so boring, right? Like imagine just seeing a command line interface, and literally the hack can be executed without the hacker actually being there. It can set a time or a trigger or something. So a lot of these things kind of happen passively. Think of ransomware, right? Which is what hit the Colonial Pipeline. So it's not as exciting, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I wish it looked like the Matrix, like where I've got a screen and these numbers are going down. I can somehow read the bits and bytes. Like, I see that. Like, there's Neo right over here. And there's John's avatar moving. It's not like that at all. It's actually quite. It can be very boring to the nascent in this industry. But for myself, I actually work in the strategy and business side of cybersecurity. So we plan what's our next strategy? How do we actually get this off the ground? How do we help these technical teams execute? And specifically, for our customers, right? So every business has customer trust that they have to build. And so my job is to build that roadmap. But what's that picture? How do we help our customers actually maintain trust? So if you guys want to build this next cool Catholic app, how would we secure that and build customer trust with people's data? So the other side of it, like there's the cybersecurity stuff that we see in movies. And then there's this other side called data privacy, which is not so technical, but it's super important, right? This data privacy side is, what do we do with information that people put into our platform? So there's that side as well, which can be used or abused, as we've seen on the news.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. There's a saying, right? If there's something that can be stolen, there's somebody to steal it. And so, glad that there's people like you in the cybersecurity space. But without going further into cybersecurity, I wanted to ask, why did you get into cybersecurity, right? With your undergrad degree in theology, and I've had many great conversations with you, and you are, very theologically minded, very knowledgeable, and you love the church, as men should love the church. And so that's a great testament to who you are. But why not pursue further a career in theology? Why cybersecurity? How did that come into your life?
Yeah, so I actually transferred to the University of St. Thomas because I was discerning the priesthood and I wanted to learn theology. And I knew that by getting a Catholic liberal arts education and specifically going into philosophy and theology would allow myself to be formed with the heart and mind of the church, which was more important and foundational to any career, honestly. And it's not something that, getting a theology degree wasn't a career path. It was more of I've been lacking a lot of formation in my life, and I wanted to make up for it. And that was the main desire, was to just, go into a private university that was teaching theology, build myself up, and put myself back out into the world. So being a Catholic, being a Catholic in the workplace was the vocation that our Lord was calling me to. Specifically, how do we go out there and evangelize? Like, what kind of relationships can we kind of build? How can we bring people from the secular to the holy, right? And specifically bring them to the church. And so that's been a mission of mine for many years, to try to promote the faith at work, through work.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's excellent. And that just resonates with the Catholic CEO that we had on, Henry, last week. Is just, not necessarily becoming insular, as in the sense of, I have to start a Catholic company that just feeds, needs and voids within the Catholic Church, like the Catholic Gentleman or something like that, but actually working in the world as a, cybersecurity or something along those lines. And so I think that's
we need lots of lay Catholic men to really step up, especially because there's a lot of, you heard, I watched that episode actually with Henry. You heard him say, the corporate space is going to start pulling you towards these events that you have to go to where you have conflicts of conscience. You're going to get pulled into different things that you may not necessarily theologically or even morally agree with. And so this is where, Catholic men really have to step up and have courage, have that fortitude and resiliency.
Agreed. And so to continue that question that I had, Sam, sorry if you don't mind, why cybersecurity? What moved you to this direction in career field?
Yeah. So what really attracted me, well, first of all, cybersecurity. The word cyber actually comes from the Greek kyber, which means like to navigate. Oh. So it comes from it means that you're navigating this world of information. And in this world of information, because I went to the school for theology, I wanted to help people with their souls. And I saw a great need of going into industry and influencing how industry may be able to help man navigate this growing world of information where petabytes of data are being created every day. It's fighting for our attention. It's designed this way. The economic model is designed this way. So ultimately, I wanted to come in here and protect people. So cybersecurity is actually less about technology. It's actually more about people and our interface with technology and how people act through it. So it's all about people, right? Cybersecurity is 100% about who we are, how we believe we should use technology, our moral compass, and how that gets applied to these tools.
Yeah, that's a fascinating way of looking at it, as like an act of service, or like a service industry almost, in a sense where you're helping real people. This isn't just about IP addresses and things like that. It's much more about the individual on the other end and keeping them safe. I mean, we've all heard, horror stories of people who lost everything because of some hacker or something like that. And
Yeah.
it kind of reminds me, just kind of the things that you're saying right now, just kind of remind me of someone who's kind of influential in my thinking early on in Catholic Gentlemen, which was Saint Jose Maria Escriva, where he talks about sanctifying our work. And but my question is, how do you do that in a cybersecurity context? I mean, is it my code has a certain halo around it, that people can tell, oh, a Catholic wrote this, No, but really, like, in all seriousness, like, how do you evangelize in a workplace, especially now when we're like more and more remote, like we're not even in office places anymore? Like, how do you evangelize in your context, or at least witness to your Catholic faith?
Yeah. So I work in a place where call it like a liberal big tech company, and especially in places like that, they're receptive to some things and not receptive. So what I don't do is I get up in the morning and walk up to someone random and say, "Hey, have you read John chapter 6 on the Eucharist?" So I don't do that. But what I do is I actually do my best to show virtues in high stress situations. That's one thing that we in my industry, that's normal.
Yeah.
And then being able to give gratitude to where that strength and that virtue comes from. And that's when I get questions about how do you stay so calm in this type of environment. That's the opportunity. And I could say one of two things. I could say, well, I don't know, I could shoot it down, or I could actually give thanks to God. And those are the opportunities, those little moments where there's a lot of action and modeling that we all men can do in the workplace. And that just one little moment where they want to confirm, like, well, where does it come from? You don't have to use so many words to get them interested and to let the Holy Spirit work. Then once they're interested, that's when you bust out the catechism on them. That's where But that's when it starts leading. But like oftentimes I find that Catholic men struggle with how to actually build that relationship to try to have that moment of metanoia, like that spark that just needs that little flame. And so those are the moments I always look for, right? And being trained in theology, like I would love to get into, reverence in the liturgy, the traditional Latin Mass, and the beauty that it has, and what we can learn from it in the Novus Ordo, perhaps, right? The Anglican Ordinariate, which I regularly attend nowadays. So these elements of like wanting to go deep in the faith require something else in the beginning, which is something that I've learned to do in the workplace through obviously Saint Jose Maria, which is where the display of virtues that you guys talk about all the time is needed to be shown. And so in various ways, it's just trying to build good habits that produce those virtues, and you do them repeatedly with very little deterrence or deviation at work, and that can save souls, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. And I too have noticed. Tell me if you get questions about this, but back when I worked in a more secular context, I would get questions about my family too. Or like, "Oh, we have another baby on the way." I'm like, really? Really? Like another baby? Like, why do you need so many? But it was just kind of witness to a different order of values. Like I value different things than a huge house and a brand new car and things like that. And And have you ever got any questions about your 5 kids and your family life, that sort of thing?
Oh gosh, all the time. I mean, and a lot of my friends do too in the secular workplace. And we talk about this together all the time. You know, you tell them, especially me, like I look younger than I actually am. I got this Filipino baby face, and they look at me when I say I've got 5 kids. Hey, yeah, you too. Yeah. John looking young, man.
Yeah.
Looking young. Another one? Another one?
Exactly.
No comment, John. No comment.
I get that. I get that a lot. And we get that a lot. And so I can be very playful sometimes with those type of questions. And sometimes I'll mess around with my friends, like, yeah, another one. I know. I just think we need 3 more. So I always tell my friends, like, I'm open always to growth. And in fact, when it comes to providing as well, right? So in that context, like every time we've had a child, the Lord has always provided for us, like a bump in pay, an increase in pay, or a promotion, or a new job. So like with each child, we would always have our confidence built, and we never had much money, so but our Lord provided each step of the way. And that's the beautiful thing about being able to say that story. So when I get that question, I always say that too, like, well, the Lord provides. If he gives, he gives in all ways.
Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful. So shifting a little bit more to cybersecurity, right? Because you brought it up, right? Protecting humans, right? And dealing with humans. And that's obviously something built within the heart of man, is that to protect, right? That kind of warrior instinct to protect, or to defend, or to, go forth and win the battle. But at the same time, you juxtapose that with, it's not the Matrix. It's not, going out and catching bad guys in the cyberspace, although there is a little bit of that, right, to my understanding, within cybersecurity. And so I'd like to hear from you, kind of what is cybersecurity? What are the degrees of cybersecurity, that you have been able to work on, or that are even out there? Because I think it's really important for us as men and as fathers to understand these attacks, and to understand, I work in the digital space as well, so I kind of understand, the attacks from China to, websites in general, right? Not specific to the faith, but just websites in general as kind of, ransomware and these sort of things. But let's help us dive in a little bit further into, what cybersecurity is, how it's been growing, and your involvement within it. And I mean, in your biography, Sam read, he said that there was, neuro-hacking, and I'd like to hear, a little bit about all of those different things, as that sounds more matrixy. So
yeah. Well, I mean, we're entering a phase now in cybersecurity where we're introducing technologies like artificial intelligence. And so this is being used to manipulate truth and insert lies within truth. This is one example. It's where you can actually take a video that was posted and then modify sections of it. Say someone is speaking, or a dignitary is speaking, and now there's the threat of actually modifying the words that he's saying using deepfake technology to replicate the voice and the face, to literally put words into leadership's mouths. So that's one area of national security that's been brought up by various institutes like RSA, which is a world-renowned cybersecurity business and firm. But if we drill down from there and say, like, what really matters is the cell of society, and that's the family. And so protecting the family in this new world of the internet 3.0, we're getting to a point now where we need new tools and new mindsets with the internet today. And so what I've been doing is working with businesses to help them build cybersecurity awareness. But what we're finding is that awareness needs to go all the way back to the home, because if they don't care about their own privacy at home, they're going to bring those habits to work, and they won't be able to translate that to protecting their own businesses, thus protecting the well-being of others who share in working in this company. So cybersecurity today is all about people, like I said. And today with obviously, like I mentioned, those other technologies, we really need to get to a point where we have a basic training in cybersecurity for families. And so obviously there's great tools out there. Sam, you're working with Covenant Eyes, and your work with them, like protecting the family from moral threats on the internet. You can have VPN technologies, right, which protects the family and from man in the middle type of attacks, where VPN encrypts your internet connection, so to speak, and so people can't sniff around and look at your bank accounts. There's financial things, but I think there's also psychological attacks, potentially through disinformation, but even just the design of your physical device, the design of the way we've incentivized. So it's an economic problem that's causing human behaviors to become exploited. So we have vulnerabilities, and now we have these threats that are being exploited through the way technology is designed. So this touches on a mind at peace, which you guys had before. Yeah. But specifically in the cybersecurity world, we're paying very close attention to that, because that can be exploited to exfiltrate any kind of important data. So that's really where we are today.
Oh, and you bring up Josh there, and I know we talked with him that the idea of increase of convenience equals decrease in privacy. And the more we get involved in 1,000 different social media platforms, not only is there the spiritual risk of wasting our time and lacking in custody of the mind, right? We're not curiositas gone wild, and just and going down these rabbit holes. But there's also the physical risk, as you were saying, of giving out information of ourselves, our close family and friends, that we have to be aware of, and we have to be, I guess, first and foremost, conscious of the threat, so that we can then use the tools necessary to keep these bad things from happening to us.
Yeah, I think the psychological threats are the most dangerous today. Whenever I talk to friends and I say, hey, they'll actually ask me like, hey, so I don't see you on Facebook that much. Like, yeah, I don't really put my kids out there. I just choose not to. Not trying to call other people out. I have a different understanding of risks and, taking that into consideration. In particular, just being able to use what's called open source intelligence. If you've never heard this term before, this is the techniques that are out there to be able to find almost anything you want about a person legally, without having to illegally infiltrate, get inside of a network, exfiltrate, simply because of the amount of information that we've actually put out there on the internet, as well as publicly available information. I saw this exercise once. There was a OSINT, OSINT, open source intelligence hacker. He was looking at a picture of a person pumping gas. And so from that picture, he was able to zoom in, invert the picture, was able to see the reflection of the person, took a face, used AI to match that face to potential people out there. And so this is very easy now to take identities because of the amount of information that we have. Maybe we know your grandmother's name, and maybe your what do these pastor questions ask? Like your father's middle name, right? We can find that quite. So now we're in a place where it's very much easy. You can almost assume compromise is the posture that we always take. And so as men living in the secular world, on our phones, doing banking, doing anything that's personal, we really have to take a posture that's different nowadays. It's just going to be the bare minimum of making sure you turn on multi-factor. But these are the things that kill the body. But there are threats out there that will kill the soul, and we know that as content, whether that's pornography, but also those that also deaden our ability to achieve habits that are good for us. So, for example, addictive technology, they call it's engagement and persuasion are the techniques that these big tech companies use, right? So they want to use the ability to engage you and then take a small percentage of that and see if they can actually persuade you. So there's manipulative data that's being inserted as you're being constantly stimulated and being addicted to, some of these major tools that you guys already talked about in Josh's podcast with y'all.
Yeah, we could have a whole episode to it, and I think we have at some point about just the technology and the addictive capacity that's there, not just to pornography and things like that, but just the color psychology and everything that they use to keep you staring at this device as much as possible. Now, you mentioned a few of the threats that are out there and how easy it is these days. And I've read some articles too, on some of the threats that are out there. Things like, if you have RFID chip in your credit card and you're walking through the airport or the mall, like people are stealing all your data. And, your email headers have so much data in them that people can find out like all of your internet browsing behavior and all this stuff. It's stuff that'll just like, you can't sleep at night. Like someone's spying on me all the time. And so I vacillate. Like on the one hand, sometimes I get really paranoid and I'm like, I'm just going to delete everything. And then other times I'm like, well, they don't really care about me. Like, who am I, and why would they want to track me down? And so like, you just go swing back and forth between like indifference and like complete paranoia. So, but where's the golden mean? Like, where's prudence in all this? And like, what are some of the steps you take personally to kind of protect your family? And what are some of the things that guys can do to find that happy medium of prudential?
Yeah, that's true. And I still go through that too, especially as we learn how these threat actors, exploited things. I'm like, oh my gosh. Recently, there was something called the Log4j or Log4Shell hack, which affect websites that use Java. And Java is the language of operating systems, except for Microsoft. I mean, it runs the web. And so virtually everyone was vulnerable with a 0-day attack. 0-day meaning you're immediately vulnerable if someone decided to exploit it. So I go from there, and then I also go through like, I give up. This is just too crazy. Like there's just so much happening. And so the happy medium that I've found is actually making it harder for, like, you want to be resilient. Like there's going to be, if someone really wants your information, and here's the sad truth, and you have something very valuable, don't put it on the internet if you can. If you know that a lot of people are targeting it, it just takes money, right? That's the reality today. There's so many social engineering techniques that can be employed, but I don't think the average person is going to have that kind of information, right? And typically be financial. But the thing you want to do is protect your children and protect your family from any kind of, happenstance type of attacks. So here's what I do. I'll give you 3 steps. First step in your home is check your Wi-Fi router. Make sure you have either a very strong password, and B, you hide the SSID. Meaning that if I turn on my phone and I'm outside of John's house and I look there and I see John's awesome Wi-Fi he just bought yesterday, I'm going to be able to brute force that depending on what kind of security he has. So what you want to do is just prevent your neighbors from stealing your internet and have a good Wi-Fi router that can actually hide its SSID. Most of them can, and put a really strong password in there that's very difficult. There's some charts out there that show that if you have a 12-character password, it'll take that has uppercase, lowercase, numbers, characters. It'll actually take hundreds of years to crack that by brute force. But if you have a password that's only lowercase letters, it's instant that they can crack that. So strong passwords, you can Google that. So that's step 1, protect your outside perimeter. Step 2, the other thing you can do is consider other email protocols. In fact, I would say consider paying for an email service. I use Proton Mail. I don't make any money from them or anything like that, but I use them and I pay monthly for the space. It's secure, it's private. It's actually held, I think the data centers are actually in Switzerland. And so it's another added layer of protection. And then the third thing I do is I recommend is get something like Covenant Eyes. There's other applications out there. This should be a must if you give your children a device. Just absolute must. Like this needs to be, as Mother Angelica used to say, between your electrical budget and your gas budget. Like something like that needs to be in there. And if you're not doing it, we've already lost. And that's because of how, if you have something that's super addictive with something that's super immoral, you have a really big problem that you have to contend with in your family. And so if you give your child a phone, they should at least have Covenant Eyes immediately installed on there. If you have to give them a phone before they're 18. As you can tell, I probably won't be giving my children a phone. If not, I'll give them a dumb phone. In fact, I'm shopping for one right now. If you guys have any recommendations, I'm looking for one just for myself. I have to keep a smartphone for work, but I actually prefer, and I'm much happier with, probably not having a smartphone for myself. I think other people, you guys are stronger than I am. Okay, I'm just neurologically incapable.
Yeah, I just bought a dumb phone, so I do have a recommendation. Talking about Switzerland, they have this PUNKT, like punkt phone, it's called. Punkt means period in German, but it's a Swiss phone company, and they have like a really secure phone. It's a total dumb phone. There's like absolutely no browsers or anything. It can text and it can call, and that's about it. But no, your point is well taken, and I think people handing your kid an unprotected device that has internet access is like handing them a loaded gun and saying, "Here, have fun," with the safety off. Because a young child's developing brain, it's hard enough for adults, but a young child's developing brain can't handle things like pornography. Like, it just completely destroys their developing neuropsychology, and it can literally take years, decades to undo the damage that pornography can cause in a short amount of time. So to just hand your child an unprotected device with no filters, no controls, nothing on it is just asking for disaster. And it could literally change the trajectory of your child's life. So take it very seriously. The other thing too, I was curious about that you mentioned is your step number 2 and the email. And I've been on the fence about the Proton Mail. I have an account. I haven't paid for it yet, but I'm just curious. What is the vulnerability? I've had no one please go hack me, but I've had the same Gmail account since 2007. I've got thousands and thousands of emails in there. Like, how vulnerable am I really? Like, what can people actually extract from, like, when you send off an email, what can people actually extract from that?
Well, yeah, I can tell you actually a real life story. So a very close family member of mine actually got her identity stolen, and her email was locked out, and Gmail couldn't help her because it was perceived that it was done. Someone had logged in, changed the password, changed the name, and kept the email. They also exfiltrated a copy of the entire mailbox, so gigs of data. And if you think of over time, right, what are the odds that I might find who you're related to, who your social network is? I could build that model. I could figure out who I don't want to give away all these tactics, but basically there's data about us in there. And I have a Gmail that I still use, but I go dark on it. Like I still have a Proton Mail that is my main email. And I recommend that you get a second email, at least get a second email, and start putting your personal information, your banking information there. One of the main vulnerabilities that happens with these free, quote unquote, free email providers is that they also come with authentication services, sign in with Google, right? And so that means you have a single point of failure that's possible for someone to sign into multiple things. So if you sign in with Google, or you sign in with LinkedIn, or you sign in with one of those, it just presents more vectors for threat actors to be able to go find more data. And data today, what we call is the new oil, right? And so in this data economy, in particular, it's personal data that is the new oil. And there's stories of that being sold without people's knowledge. I was talking, John, we had a conversation earlier about things like that, right? So yeah, absolutely. So that's that. I don't know, but I don't know what your data could have, right? Specifically, Sam, but in particular, at least if you have that, if you want to stick with your Gmail, definitely put multi-factor authentication. Use an authenticator app. Google's got one, or use you send it to your text. But always have multi-factor. Something with something you have. These are just basics, right? Like when you think of any best practice that any growing adult needs to know. Like before my children even get an account, that's how they're going to be set up. And these are just the basics that we have to start to get used to. It's like telling someone, and it's hard for me because I grew up with AOL, right? Like there weren't very many threads back then. I mean, I grew up, taking the subway to the arcade when I was 10 years old, and it was fine. But when we talk to the neighbors and friends, and they don't want to let their kids play outside, or like, hey, can I go ride my bike like 5 miles that way? Like, no, not only no, but no, I don't even feel like riding there.
Yeah.
But we're used to that, but we're not used to that in our digital world. That it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. So we have to have that same mindset, that same protector mindset built in this new world. In this world, almost anyone can show up at your door in this new world, in this new internet world. And so you have to be prepared. Parati semper.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that. And you remind me of a conversation that you and I had a while back of being paranoid and you being paranoid, and I know, Sam, what you're saying definitely resonates with me. So I'm going to actually further this question down the email. So you said it's a Proton Mail. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
Proton Mail, one of them, most popular one.
So if we were to switch over there, and men listening to this, myself included, right? So I'm so ignorant, and I, like Sam, have one that goes back actually longer than Sam's. And so, and it's great. I was an early adopter of Gmail. I'm so proud of myself. And so the question is now the amount of programs and platforms and stuff like that I use that email address on. My first question is, do you encourage people to now start going through your Amazon account, going through your various different accounts and changing over your email address to a new email address, one that's more protected? And then my second question is there a simplified format of like auto forwarding things that are coming through your Gmail to a higher, more secure, email server such as Proton Mail? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, like we're getting to different types of services now. So many of your viewers may have heard of DuckDuckGo.
Mm-hmm.
They actually have come up with a new email domain where you can generate email forwarding. So if I'm on my smartphone, let's say on my iPhone, and I have the DuckDuckGo app on there, that also protects privacy and browsing, but it also allows me to sign up with kind of like a burner email that forwards directly to my Gmail. So I could actually create a layer of anonymity to protect me if I wanted to use that ability. So there's that email forwarding capability if you desire to do that.
Yeah.
I do also recommend that you switch to email platforms that aren't trying to either A, be funded by manipulation, or B, using your data without paying you for it. To me, that's part of the crux, is that if they're using your data, and this is the philosophy that I hold, if they're using that data, your data, and to profit off of it, they should pay you as if it's licensed information or intellectual property. But that's a further debate. But I still recommend that people go out there, go through all of your accounts, because if you have one account, I'm telling you, I had to clean up one of these. I had to clean up this identity theft of a Gmail account that had exfiltrated gigs of data, and all the credit cards, all the ancillary accounts, subscriptions, forgot she had, single point of failure. It was just, and they had accessed several of those accounts. And so remember, you're not up against one hacker in a hoodie in a dark room with espressos. You're up against
with Red Bulls.
You're up against a lot of You're up against organized crime.
I got a guy in a tie on my side, so I think we'll do better than the guy in the hoodie. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, it's real. And I think that, you talked about protecting the family. Your bank accounts get wiped out. Your family's going to be hurting. So it's something to take very seriously. So what's your recommendation too? Sorry, we keep harping on email, but it is
No,
something
sir, this is
that's
good.
relevant. But um, the let's say you switch to an email hypothetically, like would you recommend like deleting all that old data, or do you just let it sit there? What would be your
Yeah.
recommendation there?
So this is my recommendation: is whatever you put out there, be very intentional, right? Like we got used to this unlimited, free for all type of utilization of our email, and so we've just amassed. I mean, it's like filtering through your photos and like, oh gosh, I should delete like half of these. We should do the same thing, like do an audit of yourself. Like it's a lot of work, but you really want to find like the most important things.
Mhm.
And I think it's almost like looking at it as if it's personal belongings. Like, do you really need all that stuff? You really question that kind of hoarding, right? Like, and
Yeah.
so then filtering it, like mail, just like it's called email, right? So what happens when it hits your actual physical mailbox? You sorted it. We've lost that in email. We just kind of let it build in the inbox. Maybe John, I'd imagine you're pretty good at managing your mailbox. You got
My work
zero.
email, my personal email. No, I gave up years ago. So, yep.
Yeah, you can actually go through, like now with these new privacy laws, you have the right to be forgotten. You have the right to know what they've done with your personal data. You have the right to remove it. You have a lot of different rights, especially through EU. They have this GDPR, Global Data
Mm.
Privacy regulation. United States is looking at, that's always going through Congress, and it forces companies to have a conscience about how they use your data. So I think it's a good thing to do, to make sure you classify like what's important in those buckets, and make sure that you don't leave anything that's super important like in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Are there any tools that'll help with an audit like that, of just kind of, because I mean, I think too, another concern is that we've all, over the last, you know, 20 years, the internet's been really popular. We've all created like dozens of accounts that we've forgotten about, or that, who knows how long they've been just sitting there. Is there a tool or something that'll help you kind of sort through all that?
Yeah, sort through all the space trash, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah,
the internet big
exactly.
trash, right? I actually don't have any specific tools, other than like when you export, do an export of your mailbox is one way you can do it. So that way you can put it somewhere. Now, I don't know. Some people's mailboxes are in the gigs, and the fastest thing to do is just look for the biggest files. These are practical techniques you can do, especially if I've had Gmail since 2005, 2006 as well. Um, and I go through and I delete everything older than 2 years, and keep the stuff that I want to keep. And if I need to keep it, I don't need to keep it in my email. I'll put it on an encrypted hard drive.
Yeah.
So, but what you're hearing from me is friction. Like, oh, that is not convenient at all, right? But I think that's actually good for us, right? That's actually allowing us to reduce that kind of dopamine addiction that they built into platforms that are free like that in big tech. So yeah, it feels hard, and if it feels hard, it's probably the right thing to do when it comes to big tech.
Yeah. Wow, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the friction. You reminded me that, so we don't find time to fix these things. We've got to make time to fix these things, right? So we have to, just like virtues, just like our growth in appropriate habits, and in virtue formation, is that it has to be something that we practice and we return to, not just once in our life, not just one Lenten 44 days, not just one 90-day period, but continuously for our entire lives. And so that's what we have to be doing within this space. So I'm going to do just a little bit of, the speculative and what do you think the future holds for cybersecurity or for cyber risks? Do you, I know that there's the ability, right? If a hacker or, a group were to able to get into, large scale Fortune 500 companies, they can affect, stock prices. And if they affect stock prices on, X, Y, and Z, they can do it throughout the whole stock market. And so there are these great risks, these terrorist risks and stuff like that. Do you feel like we're going to be seeing more of that as we go forward, as people become more deadened to the reality, open to convenience and ignoring the risks? Or, what's your educated opinion on the future of these things?
Well, I can give you, based on what I'm seeing in the industry, what you saw with the, not just the Colonial hack, but also the meat producer that got hacked. So I'm foreseeing that there's going to be a lot more supply chain type of attacks, especially between nation state actors and nation state threats. You've probably seen movies where hackers attack the grid, things like that. But this is an industry called industrial controls, right? Like industrial security, ICS. That's the biggest area where we as a country need to be able to defend and fortify. That's the part of me where I can only contribute. I'm just one man. It takes a lot to actually defend that. But this is where also, I pray. I'm not just data driven. I'm faith driven. So these are things that we pray that don't happen, and we pray that we will have the resiliency if something like that were to happen. So I foresee the cyber threats moving towards the supply chain, getting into source code of tools to be able to, when a company builds a program and lots of other companies use it, that program gets sent out there, and the next thing you know, they've just bought something that's already compromised from the manufacturer by an outside threat. So these are the types of threats that keep workers like us up at night.
Yeah. So kind of one last question from me, and that's that the spiritual dimension to all of this. You have a theological background, and I think it's important that we see everything through kind of that lens of faith, that there are higher orders of being kind of involved in these decisions that we make every day. And so I'm just wondering, what's kind of a spiritual take on technology? Like there's among Christians, there's generally two attitudes that I see. One is either like, don't worry about it, just treat it just like the world does, have the big TV, have the smartwatch, and have it. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with these things, and yet it's just kind of, they don't think about it, like it's just there, so we're going to use it. Then the other attitude is kind of, for lack of a better word, a semi-Amish or like Luddite approach to technology, which is don't have anything. Like we're going to go back to basics. We're going to have like oil lamps and stuff. Like I'm exaggerating, but you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like we're going to throw everything out and we're going to be as tech-free as humanly possible. Kind of what's your take on kind of a spiritual approach to technology? And how can we use it with kind of wisdom and a awareness that there are other factors involved, spiritual and moral?
Yeah, I think of two encyclicals. The first one is Fides et Ratio by Pope John Paul. Just the first two words, know thyself. And I think that's the first part of our interface with technology, is to recognize if we have a vulnerability to certain types of technology or big tech type of tools, right? I'm talking about social media. That's the obvious one. That's been the hot topic for the last couple of years. And lots of Silicon Valley talking heads are out there on social media preaching against social media. So I think we need to take an honest inventory of ourselves, an examination of conscience of our tech, an examination of our tech conscience even, right? So like, what is it that we're using this for? And the second, so knowing ourselves, and for me, knowing myself, I know I'm just neurologically incapable of resisting this type of addictive technology. Like I'm not strong enough. And so that's the first step. Like I realize I'm there. So then I need to put up barriers, or I need to find ways for me to get benefits out of technology that don't hurt my soul, that don't hurt my ability to grow in magnanimity, in business, or in charity to my family, because there's psychological effects in that area. The second encyclical that I think of is actually Pope Benedict's Caritas in Veritate, where he talks about technology, and this never-ending desire for incremental progress in society, right? Like obviously driven economically, like economic progress. Given that some of our economic models around technology are incentivizing addiction, right? Think of like the cigarette, right? They're using human exploits. So to me, the answer is in being very intentional. Like, what is my exact purpose for using this tool versus convenience? I find a lot of parallels with this in like this desire for ultra convenience. I see a lot of parallels of this also in recent decades in the liturgy, right? So the liturgy wanting to have much more convenience, like this desire for convenience permeates all areas, like both secular and life in the church. And so I see a lot of parallels there. I guess what I'm trying to do is integrate those. Like, this is not two separate lives in our lives as men. Like these are things that actually coincide together. But if I can just go back to that second encyclical from Pope Benedict, he talks about how again, these economic models are actually promoting this false idea of what real progress is, but real progress is growing in love of God. Like that's the point of our use of technology, growing in holiness, bringing all things back to Christ, the exitus, and then the exit and the return, the return of all man to God, which is also the structure of the Summa Theologiae. Like it's just us leaving God and us coming back to God. Like this is what we are trying to do with technology today, is hopefully bring more people back to God. So how that actually plays out, there's so many ways that can go, but we have to be very intentional with our use. We have to take an inventory of that. Again, an examination of conscience of that.
Yeah. Use it, don't let it use you.
Precisely.
I think that was incredibly well said, Jeff. I appreciate that a lot, because it is something that I think most men aren't willing to admit readily, right? That we're attached to our addictions. And if we can easily justify those addictions for, the sake of work or the sake of, staying up with trends and having to appropriately be in the know, I just speak from personal experience with my own, connection to technology, that we have to really bring those to God. We have to really bring those to him and ask him directly, through the intercession of our beautiful mother, is this helping me come closer to you, or is this not, and take an honest assessment. Examination of conscience. I thought it was very well stated. Hopefully our listeners will kind of rewind and listen to that again. I thought that was really well stated. You brought up my last question is and I'm bummed that we can't spend more time talking about liturgy. So we'll have to have you back on, because, any listener or reader of the blog knows that, Sam and I greatly enjoy, good conversations on the liturgy and the beauty in our personal lives. But you brought up resiliency, and I just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity, or actually just hear from you really, what you feel the need for men is within this virtue, this ability to return quickly, to maintain our peace, if you will, and to and how you see the technology age removing that from us, and what we need to be doing to gain that and to hold true to that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on resiliency before we depart today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've done a lot of reading and research on this area for my own personal benefit as well, right? So, being in the technology world, like it's constantly just trying to absorb information. It's like a gluttony of information sometimes, right? There's not it's not moving from information to understanding to wisdom, right? And then moving to the will. And so resiliency plays a big part in my life in that. Well, first of all, like the way I see resiliency is, like you said, the ability to get back up again. But it's also, I think, the ability to recognize where one is weak and where one needs to look for help if you need help on the outside, right? So there's lots of things in this space where it's more than just being, tough and like picking yourself up by the bootstraps. It's being able to ask for help and rely on others and building a community. The other part of resiliency, personal resiliency, that I see when we went through Exodus 90, John, you and I, we did that together.
Yeah.
And we went together as a brotherhood. Like building that up is also super important, right? And being able to find that group of men in your life, especially as working men, and if you're in secular space, right? Typically I see priests there may be some priests who are alone, but like typically they build each other up. But I think there's a lack of that in the workspace, and you can tend to feel alone. And you don't necessarily have to find a Bible study group or any kind of study groups, but the ability to build relationships, I feel like, is also part of resiliency. Being able to say, like, you know what, hey, this is the path I'm going on, calling your closest friends, being courageous enough to say, like, this is where we need to go next. And I feel like, and so these are building structures in your life that allow you to achieve those goals. Now, where the technology comes in is that, Exodus 90, like I mentioned before, that's technology applied to building up resiliency. The other part of it is, technology has, like, when we speak of technology, I'm specifically thinking of the internet, right? We talk about the addictive nature and how unhappy it can make people. There's
dysphoria.
That technology dysphoria, exactly, mental dysphoria. Those are still big problems today, and I think it's not talked about enough, honestly. I know people at work, and they just always workaholics, right? Because they also have that dysphoria through some of the addictive nature and some of the tools that we have. It's even built into corporate tools, like Microsoft Teams, the alerting, the color psychology. So there's a place there where we have to be resilient to that. And again, and some people may be going through a kind of hero's journey, right? They may be taking big falls or little falls. And so looking at that archetype of the hero's journey, and I guess we don't have much time to actually go deeper into it, but I just see that there's a lot of men who are lonely out there and they need brothers. And so the ability to connect with other men and offer that is huge. And it can be from maybe not you, maybe you connect them with someone else, but there's a lack of connection out there. And I think it's a misunderstanding of the kind of stoic way of, there's this new movement of like stoicism, but I think there needs to be a connection. Like we, as we always hear, iron sharpens iron. We really do need each other out there in the field, in the front ends, in the front lines.
Amen, Jeff. I'm very grateful. I think that's all excellent things. And I know we're coming up here at the end of the episode. So, Jeff, any last thoughts for men? Any additional things that you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, just gratitude. Like and subscribe. This is really one of the best. This is really one of the best content out there for men, honestly. And I'm happy to talk with you guys and hopefully serve and protect other people as well through the show.
Oh, thanks, Jeff.
Well, it's been awesome, and I got to go do a cybersecurity audit. No, but really, it's been a pleasure having you on, and I've learned a lot. And yeah, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Jeff, in our prayers. So, well, as we end every episode, thanks for listening, and
be a man, be a saint.